Hi everyone, just to check that our sound and videos are okay.
Hi James.
Hi Ben, good to see you.
Well, thank you.
I've seen there's a growth in the hair.
Yeah, a bit. Yeah. Well, it started a lot longer a while back, then I cut it all off.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, good.
So I was trying to get back to that point.
Nice, you look good.
Thank you.
Great to see you. I know you are in Europe. Welcome. Thanks for making the time. Where in Europe are you? I hope you are safe.
Yeah, I'm safe. Hi, Jam and everybody. I'm in Stockholm.
Oh, okay, great.
And during the weekend, I will move to Norway.
Okay, well, you must be enjoying the weather then.
Yeah. Actually, it's now. That means the spring, but it's still winter. Green winter.
Yeah. Right. Okay, everyone. Before we begin, can you just change the name on your profile?
Is there a particular format other than our names?
Just maybe you want to put name and perhaps maybe speaker, so we know you're a speaker. This will allow our organizers to guide us. So I'll put myself as moderator. And then Nalindrat, can you add yourself as co-host?
Yeah, I think I'll need the host to make me a co-host.
Yeah. So next to your name, can you just add co-host? Lito, good to see you. I must say you're looking rather slim after the very busy campaign period. Dear friends, Lito is my friend, but he was in the thick of the elections in the Philippines. So yeah, over to you, Lito.
Thank you, James. I think that's the only good thing that come out of the elections, that I do something.
Yeah, I'm very excited and waiting to hear, in spite of the outcome, but just this analysis on the ground. And Sokunthea, yes, I know the community elections are, due 5th June, but I'm sure things are already moving, yeah?
Next week it will be start the community election campaign, 21st, for 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I also want to speak about the order of our discussion today. I was thinking that we can go in the order of elections, so Lito, if I hope it's not short notice that we can start with you. It's fresh, the buzz is still there. We can still even feel the aftermaths here in Bangkok. So it'll be good to hear from you. The next person would be Lake from Asia-Center. Lake has been monitoring very closely the Bangkok governorial elections, which takes place on Sunday. So she'll be coming from that perspective. So she'll be speaker number 2. And then Sokunthea, you'll be next, given that the campaign starts the week after, and a month later you have on 5th June you have the election. And Benjamin, I know most discussions are about the last quarter of the year, but possibly even next year. But I won't steal your thunder. I'll wait for you to provide us your views on the ground. We have 4 minutes on the clock, and we'll start promptly at 4 with a brief welcome and thanks to and thank you remarks to our organizers here. Arlegue, may I ask you to adjust your camera slightly? So because you look small and a bit low. Yeah, okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you. We have another 3 minutes on the clock just to give everybody a heads up. So again, the order will start with Lito, followed by Arlegue from Asia-Center, followed by Sokunthea, live from Stockholm, in Sweden, and then Ben from Kuala Lumpur. Yeah.
Actually, Jam, Mike, you can call me Sokunthea.
Sokunthea, okay, easier.
Yeah, easier. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
My
Sorry,
soft name. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fine.
So your soft name, okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
James,
I assume, Sokunthea, you are in Stockholm?
Yeah. Now I'm in
Okay.
Sida building.
Oh, you're in CDA building, okay.
Yeah.
I used to work for International Ideas, so not very far. Enjoy Gamlastan.
Yeah, thank you.
James, I'll be having a PowerPoint presentation. Is that okay?
Sorry, Lito, you came in broken. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. I was saying that I'll be having a PowerPoint presentation. Is that okay?
Yeah, I will just ask the organizer. Organizer, could you kindly allow us to share screen? Yeah, the organizer has already allowed that function. For me, can you just check if you have that capacity as well?
Yes, it appears that I have that.
Okay. Yeah. So a minute to go now. Okay, and we are on. So welcome everyone. Welcome to the audience in the room. Welcome to the speakers, and a big warm thank you to our hosts, the May 18 Foundation, who are convening this year's Gwangju Democracy Forum. This is a parallel session. The title of the session is Multi-Party Democracy in Southeast Asia. Asia-Center is very proud to co-host this event. Once again, this is our second year having the privilege to convene a session. We did one last year in 2021. And for this year, we are very fortunate to once again to collaborate with the May 18 Foundation and to participate once again at the Gwangju Democracy Forum. Our session is called Multi-Party Democracy in Southeast Asia. We are very privileged to have Ms. Sokunthea, who's the Media Development Director of the Cambodian Center for Independent Media. We have Dr. Benjamin Loh, Senior Lecturer of Taylor's University, Malaysia, We have Celito, Arlegue, who is Executive Director, Council of Asian Liberals and Democrats, a network of political parties and parliamentarians based in the Philippines, and Korbkusol, Neelapaichit, who's a researcher at Asia Center in Thailand. My name is James Gomez. I'm from Asia Center, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. Many countries in the larger Asia region and Southeast Asia in particular are at various stages of coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we turn into 2022, we have witnessed a series of elections. We have seen state and provincial elections, like what has taken place some months earlier in the state of Johor in Malaysia. We have the recently concluded presidential elections, but also other supplementary elections for the Senate and in the Philippines. On Sunday, 22nd of May, residents of Bangkok go to the polls to elect the governor. And then in Cambodia, the campaign kicks off next week for the commune elections that will take place on the 5th of June. Something that's emerging and definitely flagged in the 2002 elections, the presidential elections in the Philippines, is the role of disinformation. We are already seeing it emerging as a trend in the Bangkok elections, and Lake from Asia Center will then articulate, how what kind of implication it holds for the national elections. As the voters become younger in Malaysia due to the amendment, where those above 18 and above can vote in Malaysia, they are also increasingly becoming targets of disinformation as Malaysia also gears up to the polls. And we have seen similar incidents playing out also in Cambodia. The communal elections coming up in June, and possibly what that means for the national election next year. The key thing here we want to unpack is while elections have traditionally been a measure for democracy, but in the region are also becoming instruments through which authoritarian leaders through populist policies, seek a fake legitimacy and come into power through the electoral process. So the unpack these details and give us a sound Southeast Asian perspective. Our speakers from the region this afternoon. The speaking order is Lito from the Philippines will go first, followed by Arlegue from Thailand. Next, we will have Sokunthea from Cambodia, and last but not least, Dr. Loh from Malaysia. Without further ado, I will now stop sharing screen and turn the time over to Lito, our first speaker. Lito, the floor is yours. We can see your screen, Lito. If you can just select the display mode, so we can have the full screen.
Okay,
Yeah,
can
perfect.
you see the full screen?
The floor
now?
is yours.
Okay, thank you. So again, thank you,
Yes,
James.
we see the full screen, and we hear you loud and clear.
Yes, so thank you, James, and thank you, Asia Center, for your kind invitation to be part of this panel on multi-party democracy in Southeast Asia. So this topic is of great interest to me because, like what James said, I also serve as Executive Director of the Council of Asian Liberals and Democrats, which is a regional network of political parties in Asia. So this afternoon, this evening in Korea, I have been asked to focus specifically on the Philippines particularly on the recently concluded presidential elections and how its process and results reflect the weakness of political parties and the strength of social media in shaping political discourse and outcomes in the Philippines. From this analysis, it will attempt to come up with prospects for Philippine democracy, including multi-party competition, amidst the imminent threat of populist authoritarianism. So to structure my presentation, I will use this self-reflective model developed by Professor Gary Rolfe, which asks three simple questions: what, so what, and now what? So this model, it appears, is also being used in crisis management. And I think it is just apt to use this in the analysis of the recent elections, because I think it also reflects a broader crisis of Philippine democracy. So in this regard, I will divide the presentation into three parts. So in the first part, I will try to explain the most important factors that impact on the 2022 presidential elections in order to understand the nature of the problem. The second part then looks at the implications of the election results to Philippine democratic institutions and the prospects of Philippine democracy in general. And then I will conclude my presentation with some proposals on what can be done by democratic forces in the Philippines in the short, medium, and long term, considering the recent political configuration. So let me start with this quote from Nobel Peace Prize winning Filipino journalist Maria Ressa. She said, and I quote, "So this election is emblematic of everything that needs to be fought globally." So this particular quote of Maria Ressa, I think, captured the importance of these elections, because as what James said, the repercussions can be felt even beyond the Philippines. So Maria Ressa in particular highlighted the role of tech platforms, which according to her, kill the good in people because of their incentive structure, which allows the bad, the clickbaiting, anger and hate, and lies to proliferate. So the tech social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok in particular, along with social media influencers and nano-influencers, contributed significantly to the outcome of the recent elections by becoming the primary mechanisms to propagate disinformation. So last February 2022, for example, the preliminary result of a study done by Check.ph, an academe-based fact-checking initiative in the Philippines, showed that Vice President Leni Robredo, who is also the leader of the opposition, is the biggest victim of disinformation. Also, former Senator and now incoming President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos is the main beneficiary of positive but misleading message on social media. A month earlier, in January 2022, Twitter suspended more than 300 accounts linked to the supporters of Marcos, which reportedly violated the rules on manipulation and spamming. Throughout the campaign period, Facebook also taken down several accounts for malicious activities, and it also flagged accounts such as SMNI, which is our counterpart of Fox News in the United States. And this is a media organization which is very supportive of Marcos, and it has been flagged for violating community standards as well. These actions of Twitter and Facebook, however, proved to be too little, too late, because the ecosystem of disinformation has been well established and widespread ahead of the 2022 elections. Some analysts even argue that the narratives of disinformation about the martial law period in the Philippines, the legacy of the Marcoses, and portraying them as the real victims of the Aquino family, they have been circulating for more than a decade, even before the 2010 elections, where Bongbong Marcos sought and eventually won a Senate seat. Sheila Coronel, a veteran journalist and founding executive director of the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, even went further, arguing that the Marcos myth-making started way before, even before she was born. She said that social media, of course, amplified this in recent years, but she argued that the lies, evasions, elisions, exaggerations were sowed almost 100 years ago. This reality, however, begs the question, why did Filipinos believe in the myths and the lies? Why did Filipinos fall for fake history? I think this requires a deeper and longer discussion, but let me attempt to provide 3 clues to a possible answer. The first one, Filipinos are disillusioned already with liberal democracy and the politicians who espouse such system. A 2020 Pew Research survey, for example, showed that almost half of Filipinos said that most elected officials do not care about ordinary citizens. While an earlier Pew survey showed that only 15%, that's 15% of Filipinos are fully committed to liberal democratic politics. The second reason, the Philippines is experiencing an education crisis in terms of growing number of out-of-school youths and worsening quality of education. And this crisis was made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic. So this crisis could partly explain why in the survey done by Social Weather Station in December 2021, a majority or 51% of Filipinos said that they find it difficult to spot fake news on television, radio, and social media. So this is complementary to an earlier study by the Ateneo Policy Center focusing on young people aged 18 to 29. And in that particular study, it was found out that close to half of the respondents were not able to pass a quiz which asked them to identify fake news. Moreover, in a 2017 Perils of Perception survey done by Ipsos, it was found out that the Filipinos ranked 3rd globally when it comes to lacking the knowledge of key issues concerning the nation. But the irony is we remain to be the most confident about this. So we have the confidence, but we don't have the necessary knowledge to back up that confidence. So that's the second reason. The third reason, I think, is that the political opposition did not have the time, resources, and capacity to counter these trends, the education crisis, as well as the disillusionment with democracy. And this task was made more difficult but by what UC Berkeley Professor Lisandro Claudio called the most formidable dynastic coalition that our country has ever seen. He was referring in particular to our version of MAD, mutually assured destruction, in the sense that the most dynastic families, the Marcoses, the Arroyos, and the Dutertes, they come together in some sort of unholy trinity. So the political opposition, particularly the camp of Vice President Leni Robredo, also did not have much time to prepare for the 2022 elections because she waited until the last minute to run. As late as October 2021, she was still trying to come up with a united opposition. But that united opposition did not materialize. Actually, to be honest, Vice President Robredo actually did not want to run in any capacity. She just wanted to facilitate a united opposition. But when it did not materialize, she decided last minute to contest the presidency. But because there was too little time to prepare, it eventually reflected in the results of the elections. Her campaign actually gathered momentum throughout the campaign period. It inspired ordinary people to give their time, efforts, and resources, which is quite unique in this particular elections. But at the end of the day, time was not enough to counter the Marcos Duterte Arroyo juggernaut. It also did not help that the so-called People's Campaign sometimes comes into conflict as well with the more traditional elements of political campaigning in the Philippines. So having described the problem, let me now proceed to what are the implications of this. So the landslide majority victory of Bongbong Marcos is historic in the sense that we never had a president which won more than 50%. At the moment, the percentage of votes is around 58-59%, 31 million votes. And we never had that since the 1987 Constitution, where we are holding the current elections, which set the framework for the current elections. So this majority victory, however, could have very severe repercussions for Philippine democracy, which has already taken a beating during the incumbency of outgoing President Rodrigo Duterte. So please allow me to outline the implications of a Marcos presidency to Philippine democratic institutions. But let me focus in particular on political parties, independent media, and civil society. So when it comes to political parties, it has to be pointed out that in the Philippine context, political parties are nothing but shells of political clans or political dynasties. They do not have a separate existence outside of the political clans running them. Analysts estimate that political clans or political dynasties control between 70 to 90% of elected seats in the Philippines. A Marcos presidency would take the dominance of political clans to a whole new level, being a product itself of a dynastic coalition. This means that political parties as independent institutions will further weaken, and personality or clan-oriented politics that are currently existing in the Philippines will remain to be the order of business. On independent media, Che Hopilenya, senior editor of Rappler, put it best, and I quote, "If in a Duterte presidency, the main issue was human rights, in a Marcos presidency, it would be the truth." And she continued, "I don't know what's worse, someone who doesn't value life or someone who does not value the truth." We can expect that the independent media will be further demonized under a Marcos presidency, with an army of sympathetic news outlets like SMNI, bloggers and nano-influencers. The new administration will further undermine independent media and may, like the Duterte administration, threaten and harass them with lawsuits and online trolling. The first order of business for the independent media then is to survive, and after which to reach to the general public, which have been more distant and has become more wary of traditional media. Finally, in terms of civil society, if there is one good thing that the recent electoral exercise demonstrated to us, I think it would be that civil society in the Philippines is alive and well. The threat of another Marcos presidency has mobilized civil society on a scale not seen since the 1986 People Power Revolution. The Robredo campaign, and you can see here the meeting de avance done on the last day of the campaign, which was attended by around 800,000 people. It has provided a glimpse of the power of organized citizenry, and it has demonstrated everything that is good in Philippine society: volunteerism, compassion, creativity, inclusion, among others. While this was not able to tilt the balance this time, it provided the framework which democratic forces in the Philippines can build on the future. So let me now go to the last part of my presentation. So now what? What can be done in the short, medium, and long term to keep Philippine democracy, particularly democratic multi-party competition, alive? In the short term, I have to point out that Vice President Leni Robredo announced last week that she will establish a non-governmental organization that will become the biggest volunteer network in the Philippines. She calls this Angat Buhay, which translates to uplift lives. It's actually a program under the Office of the Vice President, which aims to bring together the public and the private sector in order to address the needs of the families in the farthest and poorest communities of the country. So Vice President Robredo said that it's also the objective of this new NGO or non-governmental organization that she's going to establish on July 1, that's when she steps down as president, to fight disinformation. And this particular announcement of the vice president was greeted enthusiastically by her supporters. I think this is a master stroke on the part of the vice president, because by establishing such organization, she can continue to harness the energy of her supporters, and provided that this can be sustained, it could also be the main mechanism for the strengthening and revival of the political opposition. In the medium term, in the same Thanksgiving event that was attended by CALD chairperson and Philippine Senator and Vice Presidential candidate Senator Kiko Pangilinan, he said that the recent election is just like the first quarter in a basketball game. The fight is not yet over. And if one thinks about it, the filing of candidacy for the midterm elections in the Philippines in 2025 is just 2.5 years away. So the political opposition should be preparing as early as now so that it can secure more senatorial, congressional, and local seats in the midterm elections while still nurturing the volunteer network through the Angat Buhay or Uplift Lives NGO. By doing so, it would put the political opposition in a better positions once it contests the 2028 presidential elections. Finally, in the long term, no substantive change can be expected to happen in the Philippines unless there will be electoral and political reforms. If politics remain to be personality-oriented and patronage-driven, the dominance of political clans is almost certain to continue. Some of the political and electoral reforms that can be considered to change the conduct of Philippine politics include the passage of an anti-political dynasty law. It's actually mandated by the Philippine Constitution, but to this day, we were not able to pass an enabling law. Maybe complement it with an anti-party turncoatism law, because it's quite common in the Philippines for politicians to change political parties immediately after elections. Maybe an enactment of party funding for political parties, having a runoff elections for presidential and vice presidential contests, and also maybe the revision and expansion of the existing party list law. Because at the moment, we only elect through party lists 20% of the lower house of the Philippine House of Representatives. So maybe this can be expanded to cover the entire house, or even to have a comparable system in the Senate. Okay, so please allow me to end by saying that despite the current Philippine political predicament, I remain confident that the future of the country remains to be bright. So after all, the Philippines is the first ones in Asia to launch a revolution against the European colonizers in 1896. The first one to establish a democratic republic in 1899. And the ones that spearheaded the bloodless people power revolution in 1986. So hope springs eternal, and we continue to believe in that. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lito, for outlining very broadly and in depth the experience of the Philippines and the Filipino people. And I think it gives the framework for the other colleagues in the webinar to articulate their points. Once again, just to remind everyone, you have 10 to 12 minutes only, as Lito, is coming out hot from recently concluded elections. He had a few minutes extra, but I will be asking you to wrap up when you reach about 8 or 9 minutes. So be quick, and keep the conversation going so that we have enough. I also, before the next speaker, who is Arlegue from Asia Center, before she begins, I also want to just flag to everybody here that Asia Center is actually embarking on a series of projects and studies around multi-party democracy in Southeast Asia. We're kickstarting it this year, and it will also be the theme of our conference in 2023, later part of August. That's why we're in particularly interested in convening this panel, because we want to keep tracking all the elections that will pan out over this and next year. Without further ado, Arlegue, over to you for an insight in what's happening with the Bangkok governor elections that will take place this Sunday. Over to you.
Thank you very much, James. Let me share screen point. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Korbkusol, Neelapaichit. I'm a research coordinator at Asia-Center. We are a research institute. We grant UN ECOSOC special consultative status. We also provide a full service of a research cycle. We undertake baseline policy brief and also book. Then we amplify our knowledge product through media and social media engagement. And the last thing, we also deliver our knowledge product through the capacity building activities. Today, I would like to share with you some analysis of the Bangkok governor election in 3 dimensions. First is the gender politics. Second is the fake news and information. And the last thing is the multi-party system in Thailand. Okay, let me begin by the gender politics. On this Sunday, 2020 May, local resident in Bangkok will go to the polling station to elect our new governor and also the city councillor. This is the first time in 9 years. Many expect this election as a positive step toward democratization, and also they try to anticipate a political trend in the national election. About the gender politics, if we consider the total eligible voter in Bangkok, we have eligible voter around 4.4 million. The women voter outnumber the male voter because our female voter is about 2.3 million. That accounted for 45%, and for the men is only 2 million, accounted for 45%. However, if we consider the total 31 candidates, we will see that majority and most of candidates, 25 candidates is also a men, and only 6 candidates is a woman. And another thing we need to note is that all 6 women candidates, they are running this election as an independent. For major political parties, they only promote male candidates. At this point, many CSO try to encourage and try to approach our candidate to propose their recommendation. First, the new governor, the new Bangkok governor should promote and improve quality of life, safety and well-being of women and girls in the city. The second thing is that they should set up a fund to protect women's rights and also improve her capacity. And the last thing is that CSO expect the new governor to appoint at least one deputy governor and also increase women participation in the city administrative position. The second point I want to share with you is about disinformation and fake news in this election. Online at the digital age and also during the COVID-19, online campaign is very effective and very advantageous for this election because it provides a two-way communication between candidate and also voter, and also it serves more creative engagement and also easy to reach young people voters. From this election, we can see that internet and social media is very popular, and in this slide show 6 leading candidate in this election. They have a lot of followers, and during 21st of March and until the 7th of May, Facebook on their Facebook account posts totally almost 500 posts, and this and their post was well responded by 89,000 comments by people and individual voters. However, in this phenomena we can see the fake news and disinformation attack. For example, candidate number 1, we wrote he is a candidate from the Move Forward Party, he also has to post on his own Facebook that the false information that he will increase the land tax if he win the election is not the true. And another case in this, you can see from this slide, Chacha Sittipan, he is a independent candidate. Number 8, he also have to reject or deny false information that he has involvement with the Pheu Thai party. He also posts this comic picture to encourage people and speaking that the false information needs to be gone. And we also see the matter. The matter is the online news organized new agency. They try to provide reader with a useful checklist to identify the IO or account to help people identify which one is the IO account during this election, so people can identify and separate between which one is true and which one is the false information. What we learned from this phenomena, the first thing is that the candidate and media have to take a leading role in debugging fake news, verify information, and even have to promote digital literacy. Whereas the Election Commission of Thailand seem to turn by on this issue. This information and fake news is a very important issue because first, it destroys the quality of the electoral process, and the second thing is that like in Philippines, it is a threat to the multiple party because it's increased the burden to political party to address this problem. And the last point is that the more serious is that if this information or fake news used to attack women based on their gender, this will drive women away from the political participation. Okay, the last thing I want to talk with you is about multiple party in Thailand. Okay, sorry, maybe from this information, right? We couldn't see the authorities or even it's like a election commission to take care or to directly and address this point. But however, ironically, expressing legitimate online or criticism in Thailand is regulated by restrictive legislation. As our report that is coming in this year, this report try to show how the restrictive legislation, including a Constitution, Penal Code, Computer Crime Act, Cyber Security Act, or even the emergency decree, adopt to restrict or limit digital rights and silence online critiques by restricting access to content, persecuting and harassing in the internet user, and also putting pressure on the tech company or ISP. The last point I want to share with you is about the multi-party in Thailand. As I told you before this election, I mean the Bangkok governor election is important because first it reflects a trend in the national election. The second thing is that we can see that only some political parties send their representative, and only the rest didn't decide to not send their representative to run this election. In the next election is expected to be held in the last election of this year or the next in the next quarter of the next year. At this point, we need to talk about the 2007 constitution, because this constitution that is backed by the military government without civil society and public participation during the drafting process. 2017 constitution, it came to change the political landscape in Thailand. because first it was draft to reduce influence of the Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra and also his large party that won its majority since 2001 election. And the second thing is that it was draft to help the military party to establish the government coalition by introducing mixed member apportionment and one ballot paper system for the first time in the 2019 election. As a result, and based on the 2017 constitution, this constitution enabled many a number of medium size and small size party, including Future Forward Party, to gain more parliament seats more than they expect, and even 11 small party also having is like 1 or 2 parliament seat also can form the coalition with the military backed party and support the Prime Minister Prayut. However, in the next election that is coming, the electoral system will be changed again as a result of a constitution amendment. The 2 ballot voting system will be reintroduced. First one for the lower house representative, and the second one is for the party list for the political parties. This change is likely to be favor large political party while working against the small party, including progressive party that emerged in the 2019 general election. And if you see my presentation here, this is the expectation of the party that will run the next election. The first column is the political party that is already in the parliament, and the second column is the representative is the political party from the opposition, and the last column is the new party that is established after the 2017 constitution. Okay, that is my presentation. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, Lek, for your presentation and articulating how the insights into the Bangkok governor election will kind of give us a window into how the national elections may pan out, either at the next quarter, which is at the end of the year, the quarter at the end of the year, or the first quarter next year. Very quickly moving along, I will now invite Sokunthea. Yes, she's already here to give us her views and opinions and observation, both of the commune elections and probably a snowballing into the future for next year on the general election. The floor is yours, Sokunthea. Over to you.
Yeah. Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, and Chumrip Su, and thank you for the forum. For Asiacenter to organize the forum to ensure that what is happened and what is going on in Southeast Asia, especially in Cambodia, Thailand, and also in Philippines, that some of our country have the election at like the Philippines, Thailand, and also including Cambodia, that will be held the commune election for next month. Actually, I would like to praise a bit about the background. Why is Cambodia and when Cambodia it will be have the first elections after the Paris peace agreements in 1991. That means before the Paris peace agreements, Cambodia had a long experience of the civil wars among our leader. And after that, in 1993, Cambodia starts, that means the first national election with that means multi parties to join that election. And from 1991, that means for our parliament election, we have, that means, a 5 years term. But for the seat of the prime minister, it's no guarantee. She or he can stand for the election. It depends to the support from the voters. And from the 2017, after the dissolution of the opposition party, I think it every body know already what happened in Cambodia. In 2000, that means in 2017, that means the government, that means using the court to dissolve the opposition parties, and it currently some of the political officer, the former of the opposition, it's a party, it still cannot stand or participate in their that means a political activity. And in 2016, the civil society, the human rights defender, were arrested, and some of the political activists and leaders also arrested, and the leader of opposition party were in jail and forced to relocate or the exiles themselves in abroad. And we come back to see the role of the independent media from 2016 and 2017. Some of I mean, the independent media, it was closed down in Cambodia, like the Cambodia's daily, and the government it used attack law to force them to leave from the country. This is one of our that mean challenges, and some of our that. Journalists, independent journalists also were arrested. And at that time, from 2016 and 2017, we faced a lot of challenges in Cambodia, especially the civil society and political activists were arrested. And from 2017, we as the independent media, we don't have chance to broadcast our news through our channel. So from 2017 up to now, for our channel only through online. This is, and for the others updating, currently we use only the online platform to post and for our daily news. And in 2021, during the pandemic, the Cambodian government to adopt like the national internet gateways, and also to trust, I mean, the cyber security and the cyber law to ensure that to restrict the social media user, including the independent journalists, that the government they want to control the content and also the activity of the independent journalists. And the role of the independent journalists during the election. For this year in June, Cambodia, it will be organized the commune election, and start from next week, 21st May to 3rd June, Cambodia will be have a big commune campaigns before the election for 2 weeks. But we can see after the show, the opposition party, and now that means the time for the opposition party to prepare and stand for the commune elections and the upcoming election. It will be held for next year, and we can see what happened. And I noticed that according to the information that I got from the National Elections Committee, only 17 the political party that it stand for the register for the commune election that will be held in 5th June. And we also can say that the real that means opposition party stands for the election. I myself, I know think that it's no real opposition party. Only one, the candidate party, that they have some of the candidate stands for election, but it's not all of the commune. And also the other challenges. Some of our, that means, sorry, it's not our, some of the political activists, and also it come some of the candidates parties candidate were arrested and were accused. And this is the other challenges and not check and balance for the ruling party. They have the media and they also have their officer. They also went to the province or to the commune. They strengthen their party, but for the others party doesn't have the balance. When the other parties, they want to the communes, and the authorities accused because of this, accused of that. So it shows that it's not check and balance between the ruling party and the other party. It stands for the election. And besides of that, the role of the independent media is very important during the commune election. We actually, for the ruling party, they have their own media, many media platforms, both newspapers, the online, and all of the television channel that there is a support to the government. But we can see the other party beside of the ruling party, they doesn't have the media platform to that means to post or to announce what is happens, and what is their policies, and what is their strategy. Nothing. And so we are the independent media, play very important role to help them to post their policy, to ensure that the people at the local level, they know all of us, the policy of or the strategy of the other party too. This is very important point that the independent media, it play very important role during the election. And the other important role of the media and also CSO during the election, we can organize the summer awareness raising to the people. They understand about their basic rights. Because before the election, the party who have the power have a lot of money. They can give some gift to the people, but the people at the ground, they did not analyze anything. They just get the gift, and during the election, they can vote for that, and they did not analyze what is their the requirement. When they select the good leader for their communes or for their representative in the 4 year or next 5 year. And so the role of the civil society is very important at that time. We can want to province to organize some raising awareness and also training it related to the vote education during before the election. And also, that means we, the media-based organization, we need to work closely with the other civil society, both in Cambodia and also the at regional level, to ensure that we can discuss and to prepare the work plan together with the other civil society, what activity that we can join together. In the last 2 days, that means 17 civil society, we released the statement to express our concern and also our civil society role during the communal election. We just monitor what is going on during the election, but we plan it did not release any report related to the election, because we know that for the communal election, the National Election Committee, it's not independent judge, and their officer it selected from the party, and so it's not independent. And this is the way that we are the civil society. We try to lobby with the NEC to make sure that the NEC it should be the independent. If the independent, that means the other party that they plan to stand for election, they have that means the power and check and balance, and they can stand for the election. This is that the role of the civil society in Cambodia, that we work together. And besides of that, related to the challenges in Cambodia, currently it's like the government is adopted during the pandemic. Some of the law it is strict to the civil society, the social media user, especially to the independent media and the journalists. We ourselves, we have our own media platform. Our staff member, it were the threats and were arrested. That means in the first quarter before the election, and we can wait and see together what is going on during that means the campaign, and also during the commune's election. And for this year, Cambodia it's like will be that means a chairmanship of the ASEAN, and we civil society, we also will be plan to organize the other activities we call APS ACSC, and we plan to conduct some of the workshop it related to the election, and also it related to the freedom of expression, and also the freedom of press, to ensure that we can bring our issue to the ASEAN leader to know. And we noticed that in the ASEAN leader always copy and paste the bad model from one countries to others, like according to our previous speaker already mentioned, like Benjamin and also Celito, Korbkusol already mentioned it related to the election in Southeast Asia. I noticed in Philippines, I mean the rotation of from generation to the other generation. Like in Cambodia now, the Prime Minister he start to promote his son to be the candidates of the Prime Minister, and we can wait and see together what is going on in the ASEAN countries. This is for we as the next generation. We want to see our society it's peaceful and also full of human rights, democracy. It based on our constitution. Like we have only in the paper, but for the practice, the civil society, the independent media, when we report it related to the sensitive issue, especially the related to the corruption, it related to the election, the government is always accused the independent journalists to support the other political party or the support opposition party or something like that. This is that we, the civil society, the independent journalists, we just want to spread the real information to the people. They want to know what is going on, what that means the real situation that happened in Cambodia. We want the people, they have a criticized thinking. They can decide, they can select the good leader or the good their representative. It's not mean that their representatives come to meet with them only before the election. For instance, the case of the Naga world, that means the strikes happen, the worker is violated by the authority, but the case is the parliamentarian member, the case it happened near parliament, but the parliamentarian member is never come and never meet with them to discuss about what is going on. What is the case it's happened? This is that mean the injustice in Cambodia society. Why we are the independent journalists, it play a very important role to bring the real news that happen in Cambodia to the people, to the officer, to make sure that the officer is know about the real, about the issue that happened, and he will take an action all of the case, including the upcoming the communal election and the parliament elections next year, and all of the political party, they can stand for election and will have the free and fair election in Cambodia. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sokunthea, for that, outline. The central message is really that, Cambodia is going into an commune elections with a lack of independent media, but at the same time also, genuine political parties to contest. It's interesting that the authorities, the election authorities, have said there can only be 2 rallies in a commune, and which means this would also have a bearing on the Candlelight Party as the other minor parties contested for probably the second rally. So with that, let's now quickly move to Benjamin, who's joining us from Kuala Lumpur. Please share your insights about what's happening. Will Mahathir come back? With that lead, over to you, Ben.
All right, thank you very much, James. Thank you very much also to the organizers, Asia-Centre and Gwangju Democracy Forum, for inviting me to present here. My name is Benjamin, and I will be presenting on multi-party democracy in Malaysia. I think it's going to be quite a tough act for me to sort of follow up on a lot of the very, very interesting insights and marvelous presentations from all my contemporaries before, but I'll do my best. Malaysia hasn't, we do not have a general election coming up in mind yet. We are estimated to have our general election in September next year, but there's a lot of rumblings on the ground that indicate that the government might call for a snap election essentially. But before we go into that, let me just sort of highlight the kind of quagmire that the Malaysian political system is currently in under. The current government now is sort of like a very weird coalition that's comprised of the currently ruling Barisan Nasional coalition, and it is supported in government by the Perikatan Nasional coalition that comprises of Bersatu and PAS essentially. Okay, so there's essentially, even though these parties are all in the government, essentially, they are really at loggerheads with each other, as the 2 main Malay ethnocentric parties of UMNO and Bersatu are sort of like jostling with each other to become the dominant party that will represent Malays in the country, essentially. Okay, and on top of that, the current opposition has sort of taken a little bit of a backseat. There was this memorandum of understanding that was signed between the government and the opposition coalition of Pakatan Harapan in a bid to avoid votes of no confidence. So if you have been following Malaysian politics has been dogged by one major thing in the last 3 years, essentially. And essentially, it is rampant party hopping. So locally, we refer to this as frogging. The idea here is that an elected representative will switch allegiances. And often these switches are people assume that it's motivated by money, or sort of like representatives are trying to stay either in government or trying to remain in power in one way, shape, or another. And usually these frogging attempts usually result in the destabilization of government. Malaysia is a parliament democracy, and the government, whether it's the federal government or local state governments, can only remain in power if they have the majority in their elected houses, essentially. Okay, and so this was really what kicked off this was started with the very, very infamous Sheraton move that took place in March 2020, and essentially that was when there was a bunch of sort of like political maneuverings happening in the background. Our Prime Minister at the time, Mahathir Mohamad, resigned, and that led to the Perikatan Nasional Gambaran coming to power, essentially. Even then, since then, the entire country has been in a very, very fragile state politically. We've had 3 state elections that have essentially collapsed from since then until now, essentially. And so there is a lot of sort of like talks going on about how the political configuration is going to improve as a result of that. So in a situation like this, I mean, the public confidence in our sort of like electoral system has really become very, very poor. You know, we've had 2 prime ministers in the space of 2 years, essentially. And even in the last several state elections, the government parties themselves actually opposed each other in local elections because they were trying to see who would be the dominant between UMNO and Bersatu in many of these local elections. They were often seen as proxies to national perception about which party is going to be dominant, essentially. Okay, and one of the major things that we also see in all of these state elections, we just had, as James mentioned, we had a state election that took place in Johor a couple of months back, and even then, that was seen as like a major political battleground. It was seen as, you know, almost a post-COVID kind of election. But even then, turnout has been very, very poor, and that's going to be a major concern by all parties going into the general election if it gets called anytime in the next year or so, essentially. Okay, and basically there are certain parties in government that are trying to push, UMNO in particular, are trying to push for elections to be held earlier because they feel that the current public sentiment is more positive towards them, essentially. And for the most part, and this is something that a lot of political analysts have also said, that there is a strong likelihood that BN will very likely win in the next general elections. But of course, that is just one aspect about many other things that are problematic in the current political space. So the aforementioned MOU is currently in a very tenuous and it's in jeopardy now at this point, because one of the conditions of the MOU was that the government would agree to pass an anti-party hopping law, which was tabled in Parliament, but then was sort of like delayed. It was ended up being shelved due to certain criticisms regarding it. But for the most part, there is no clear indication of when is that going to be passed. And PH, for the most part, is still holding up its end of the bargain and not trying to initiate any sort of vote of no confidence or keeping to the MOU as a result of that. Behind closed doors, there are obviously a lot of different political wheeling and dealing happening, whereby there's a lot of allyships and coalitions that are constantly shifting as different parties are trying to jostle for power. And this is true not just amongst the government, but also amongst the opposition parties as well. And this is something that also frustrates a lot of Malaysians, because these are things that are affecting our democracy, but they're happening behind the closed doors of elite boardrooms, essentially. Okay, as James also mentioned, there were one major game changer that really came about this year was the introduction of sort of like 18 plus voters. So prior to this, the legal voting age in Malaysia you had to be 21 years and above. And this was finally approved after having one whole year of being delayed by the government, essentially. This was finally approved, and it introduced 40% new voters into our electoral roll. And it's seen as a major game changer. And a lot of the political establishment are essentially quite worried about their voting patterns, because this is a community. Sorry, this is an age group that previously before they had plenty of time to shape through their propaganda, through their party machinery and whatnot. But now, because they're entering into the political space a lot sooner, before a lot of those machinations can sort of take place, they are very worried about the outcome, essentially. And the fact that they're being a game changer is also kind of questionable, because during the Johor elections, there was no clear support about which direction this particular group would be voting for. And for the most part, their turnout was also they didn't have a sizable turnout, essentially. So that aspect is still something that is kind of very concerning, but we believe that there is going to be a strong turnout when it comes to the general elections when it does happen as well. A new sort of like youth-focused political party called Muda also sort of came about very, very recently. It came in quite strong. It has a very, very simple platform, essentially. They are essentially arguing that they're disruptors, they are going to bring something new to the political table, and they sort of like stood during the Johor elections, and against all odds, for a party that only was registered in January, managed to win 2 seats, essentially. So, sorry, they managed to win 1 seat. And so they actually outperformed all expectations. But of course, the party still has a long way to go. They really do not have any proper machinery. Their grassroots support is very limited, essentially. And for the most part, they don't really have any proper policy platforms as of yet. So it remains to be seen what is the effect of this party in the long run, essentially. Okay, now sort of like to look at like the bigger picture, and I guess the elephant in the room, essentially. So with the return of, Marcos back in the Philippines, as was very well explained by Lito earlier, there is also this huge fear that, we will see a disgraced elite coming back into power as well. And of course, I'm referring to former Prime Minister Najib, who essentially was, he lost the 2018 elections on the platform, essentially, that he caused the country's economic woes through his siphoning of funds through the 1MDB scheme, essentially. So he was finally convicted sometime last year, was sentenced as well. But for the most part, there's still a lot of, he's still in the appeal process, but he's still able to sort of like continue doing what he wants to do. And for the most part, the government and the public are still giving him quite a bit of space to continue as though nothing is going wrong, essentially. So he has, during the early point in 2018, when he fell from grace, he really was in a very, he was on a very, very strong downward trend, essentially. He had a really disastrous interview with Al Jazeera where he stormed off midway. There were a lot of these sort of like reports of his seizures and all these problematic issues that happened under his watch, essentially. But he then launched this social media campaign called Malu Apa Bosku, which stands for Why the Shame My Boss. And it was incredibly successful. It ran for about a year, but was the whole point of this campaign was to reform his image as a man of the people, in spite of the fact that he is the son of a former prime minister and essentially was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. And that all of these accusations done against him were all wrongful accusations. He's innocent out of all of these things. And this campaign resonated very, very strongly with Malay grassroots communities throughout the country. And as a result of that, Najib is probably one of the more popular politicians that we have currently as well, even though he is a convicted felon now at this point. And so what's interesting to see is that a lot of rumors are going about that, Najib is just one of many former BN politicians who have been charged with corruption. He's probably one of the few that actually has been convicted of it, but there's a few others as well. And these are what we call, the nickname that we have for them is we call them like the court cluster, essentially. And there is this argument that the court cluster, these are individuals that were charged with with very, very million or billion dollar deals in corruption, essentially. So they carry a lot of the purse strings in the party. And it is understood that a lot of the discussions that are going on as to how the sort of like the party enters into the general election is to see whether or not the party is going to give sort of like pardons or let many in this court cluster run free, or to actually put them to task and not allow them to return to power, essentially. So that's one of the things that are happening behind the scenes. And we as analysts are often just examining and just hoping for the best now at this point. But for the most part, that's sort of like the situation that we have. And Najib is very likely, from the way things are going, they've passed certain rules to sort of allow him to stand in elections, even though he has been convicted. But it is very likely that he is probably going to stand in the next election coming on as well, or at least he'll play a very, very important role in it. So this goes back to the discussion about how social media is seen as a huge political battleground for the country. A long time ago, the opposition was always seen as having the upper hand in grassroots engagement, meaning that most people would turn to social media to sort of advocate for the opposition for the most part, often independent of any sort of political interference. But of course, the government has sort of realized that, and they themselves created a lot of these, cyber troopers, to sort of like to provide propaganda, spread disinformation, and to sort of like advance agendas to create echo chambers, push out people, and to really ensure that only their voice is heard and everybody else is sequestered elsewhere, as in that sense. And this is actually becoming very, very powerful, and they actually have become very, very successful in controlling the narrative in many of these online spaces. Now, the problem that we are seeing right now is that in many of these online spaces is that the Malay community is actually quite split, where previously before it was often they were quite focused on just supporting UMNO, but now we're starting to see that their divisions are split almost in many different directions. You've got the more liberal types that are focusing on looking at, say, PKR or even Bersatu in that sense. Then you got the more conservative types that are going for UMNO and even the very conservative PAS Islamic Party, essentially. But the idea here is that there is currently a lot of the Malay community leaders, political leaders are being presented, either are leaders who are there is no clear leader that is free of corruption charges, or at least one that has a very strong policy platform, essentially. That's one of the main problems that we're seeing in that sense. So I just want to sort of end my session today, essentially, is that there is talk that, the general election is going to be held sometime this year. The UMNO party has been pushing for it to be held this year as well. But of course, a lot of this hinges on whether this anti-party hopping law is going to come, because a lot of the public's confidence in our electoral system hinges on that being put in place. Because for a lot of people, they feel that what is the point that I vote for somebody to represent me if that person can switch party allegiances whenever and there is no repercussions, essentially. So until that is solved, we're not really sure if there's going to be any sort of like return of public confidence in our electoral system. I guess that's something that's very similar in the Philippines, essentially. Okay, so that's it for me today. Thank you all so much. Back to you, James.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I have a series of questions to all the speakers, and I'll ask them in reverse order. It's a very quick fire round. I hope I can have two rounds of questions. So each person, you have about 1 or 2 minutes. Ben, I'll start with you, just to pick up on the element of youth. Now, before the Undi 18, amendments, 1 year delayed, came into place, how long has this campaign been around to push for for those 18 and above to get the vote? And do you think they would be targets of disinformation? As you say, that could be something that we need to look forward for a disgraced elite. I'm sure, Celito, that you are hearing this for the first time. You can add it to your lexicon that can make a comeback. So to Ben, a quick fire response there.
Okay, so that talk actually has been around for a very long time, but in terms of actually turning into policy, that really only came about under Pakatan Harapan. It was one of the major pushes that was done by the Minister of Youth at the time, Syed Saddiq, and that was sort of like his legacy after leaving office, essentially. And that's why that goodwill carried forth into when he formed MUDA, essentially. So one of the big issues, of course, as you mentioned, the prior to that, for many youths who are going to become voters, right? By the time they're 21, that would mean that for many Malaysians, they would have gone through at least the foundational aspects of the tertiary education system. Is whether if you're doing a diploma or you're doing some sort of like advanced certificate or vocational diploma, you would probably be completed by the time you're 21, essentially. If you're doing a bachelor's degree, you probably finish by 22, 23. And prior to this, political politics were often banned in tertiary education spaces. That was the law that was only up upturned under PH essentially. But prior to that, that was seen as a way to sort of like indoctrinate and to sort of instill propaganda to many of these youths, because at the time, many of these sort of like local, especially local public institutions, were very pro-government in the way that they handled things. So this was a way for them to indoctrinate youths before they could vote. So by the time they came of voting age, they would be entrenched in these very pro-government viewpoints essentially. So now that they've sort of dialed that back, now you've got youths who are only entering into the tertiary education spaces that prior to that, they're all only from, you know, high school era and things like that. So that is seen as we now have this gap in how we're going to sort of like prepare these voters to vote for us essentially. So I think that's one of the main fears that that some of the political establishment are seeing, because one avenue to make sure that there is a succession in voters that will vote for us has now been cut prematurely as a result of that.
Thank you, Ben. I don't see Sokunthea on the screen yet, so I'll just give a heads up. Sokunthea, yeah, can I ask, you know, you mentioned a lot about the need for an independent media, and rightly so. In your opinion, you know, what are the prospects really for independent media to take root again, you know, under this current circumstances? You know, are we going to see any improvements here, you know, in the lead up to the national elections next year?
Yeah, actually, it's based on our survey, and it related to the challenges of the independent media. And the result is noting that the situation for the independent media in 2022, it will be, that means for this year, it will be worse. It's that means if compared to the previous year. And also I noted that the case that incident, the threat related to the journalist when they report it related to the sensitive issue, it's increase if compare the same quarter as last year. But I noted the report from the Reporter Without a Border for 2022, it decreased from the rank, it was 144 to 142. But according to what I observation, and I record all of the incident and provide the legal support to the journalists at risk, especially the VOD ourselves. That means the number of the cases related to the incident, threat, and the harassment increase. That means increase is compared the previous year, especially the report is related to the politics activity, the monitor, the case, the hearing related to the political leader, political activists, the human rights defenders, and the sensitive issue that happen in Cambodia. It still that means the challenges and threat for the independent media. I noticed that I myself, obviously it's the situation, the freedom of expression and the freedom of press in Cambodia for this year and the upcoming election next year. It's not improve or not better if we compare the previous year. Actually, we can see in 2017 election. Before the election, the activists, the human rights activists, the journalists, it were arrested, and the media, the independent media were closed down, including the radio station. Until now, we don't have a right to broadcast our program or our news through the radio program, only through the online. And during the campaign, the internet, it was cut out. And for this year, the NIG it adapted, and the other law it trust, and the internet, that means the internet provider it under the tycoon. And I myself noted that it's not, the situation it's not improved. Yeah, but
Thank you.
the journalists, we need to support. Actually, it's for the journalists. We need to support our beneficiary or our network to ensure that when the journalists they face risk, we need to support them, and also the family, including the legal support and also the finance support in case they face the prison term. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that insight into the need for independent media.
Yeah.
Like, over to you. You mentioned about the role of women, the need for emphasis on women-friendly policies as put forward by some of the CSOs in the Bangkok governor elections. What's your view? Do you think this more coordinated, request for more gender-sensitive policies from politicians and emphasis on more women candidates will increase as we go towards the national elections in Thailand?
Thank you very much. I think it's possible, because if we look at our eligible voters, women are outnumbered. And in fact, in the next election, as I show in my presentation, we also see the head or the leader of some new political parties, also women. And if we look at our parliament now, not only men and women, we also have many LGBT parliament members. That is the good trend in Thailand, I think.
Okay, thanks, Lek. Over to you, Lito. The question I have for you is, and this was the undercurrent in your presentation, a silent play, if I may add, COMLEC, the role of the election commission. They were slow to the bat on so many things, especially on disinformation. Give us an insight. I mean, what did COMLEC do, if anything, and are they part of the target of reform that we should think about in the Philippines?
Okay, so the role of the Commission on Elections. So I have to say that immediately after the election results come in on the night of May 9, there were allegations that there's some sort of an election fraud in terms of programming the electoral counting machines. Some analysts suggest that the lead between the front runner, Ferdinand Marcos, and Vice President Robredo has been consistent all throughout the different batches of election returns. So I'm not, I think, competent to comment on the validity of these claims. The Vice President said that her legal team is already looking into it. But let me also caution everyone to immediately dismissing the electoral process, because I have to point out that while the results are not to our liking, the results in reality reflect the surveys done by reputable organizations. So since November 2021, they have been saying that Marcos is leading by around 30 percentage points. He was really between 55 to 68% during that time. So the results were consistent with the surveys taken by reputable organizations, and these survey organizations have been correctly predicting election results in the post-EDSA period. So I would not immediately join the bandwagon and say that there's election cheating and that the COMELEC is behind it. Of course, many of the incumbent officials of the Commission on Elections are appointees of Duterte. Although they have security of tenure, some of them have questionable credentials, but I don't have the empirical evidence to prove that the COMELEC participated in any way in electoral cheating these elections.
Thank you, Lito, for clarifying that and giving us once again a deeper insight. It now leaves me to thank all the panelists, Ben in Kuala Lumpur, Lito in Manila, Lake in Bangkok, Sokunthea, usually in Cambodia, but now in Stockholm in Sweden. Myself also in Bangkok. I want to thank our co-organizer and host, the May 18 Foundation, for making us part of the Gwangju Democracy Forum. I think we had a rich range of presentation and some quick fire questions. Also to let you know, the Asia Center is embarking on this project on multi-party democracy and elections in Asia. And we hope to remain engaged with you. We have a range of reports and activity lined up through this year and next year. So once again, thank you very much. Have a good afternoon and see you online or offline. Sawadee krap.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.